Hour Batman. I'm Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest, co-founder of the All Ports Open Network, and on this show, as I said, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about life, faith, spirituality, game design philosophy, and whatever else comes up. This show is a production of allportsopen.com. Check out our website for our lineup of podcasts and streams about sharing, making, and talking about great stories. That's what we do at allportsopen.com. Now, there's no APON stream after our show, Holy Happy Hour, tonight. Usually we have a Monday night show. They are off this week, but I do believe that there's a stream tomorrow night, I think. If you want the full schedule, you can go to allportsopen.com, which is much more reliable than I am, and see the whole schedule right there of our show lineup. And speaking of allportsopen.com, and speaking of great stories, our horror audio drama, Weeping Cedars, written and produced by Joshua Wise, is in its final season, and the finale is very soon. I wrote this week. That's not true. I mistyped my script, but it's very soon. We are very close to the end of Weeping Cedars. So if you've never checked out Weeping Cedars, you'll soon be able to binge the entire series from beginning to end. You can certainly start working on that now if you want. It's fabulous. It's a really great. It's an extremely complex puzzle box slow horror story, and it's very, very good. So listen to Weeping Cedars wherever podcasts are found. Tonight on Holy Happy Hour Batman, I'll be joined by Ryan Boelter and Amelia Antrim of the Character Creation Cast, a podcast on the One Shot Network that invites personalities from the TTRPG industry to create characters and do deep dives into systems and rules with them. They also do an accompanying character evolution cast where they talk about how to get the most out of playing characters in different systems and just sort of everything around TTRPG play. My wife Mel and I were guests on Character Evolution Cast to talk about love and romance and TTRPGs, and we talked about safety a lot in that episode. Ryan and Amelia are joining me tonight to talk about safety tools for your TTRPG spaces. This is a recurring and important topic on Holy Happy Hour Batman, and I am delighted to have two of the most lovely people in the TTRPG scene here tonight on our show to talk about it. But before that, one more housekeeping note before we continue with the show. Next week on this show it's this very special episode because we are having our first ever actual play stream on Holy Happy Hour. The creators of the game Manish Tana, Why Is This Night Different?, who were on our show previously to talk about designing that game. It's a Passover TTRPG. They came on and talked about designing a Passover game design philosophy. It was a really great episode of the show. They're going to be back next week, and we are going to be playing Manish Tana on the show. Also, my wife Melissa, my co-host on the podcast Pot of Love, will be joining us to play as well. That's the next 2 weeks on Holy Happy Hour Batman. Same bat time, same bat channel. Now, it is happy hour, and as you can see on the screen here, I have a drink for this evening. The drink this week I titled Sometimes Making It Is More Fun, which is my drink inspired by the Character Creation Cast, because everyone I think who plays TTRPGs that I've ever talked to knows that sometimes making characters is as much or more fun than playing them. And so I was like, what kind of drink am I going to make that is inspired by character creation? And so I was like, well, it's got to be something fun to make. Well, you might not think this drink is fun to make because it involves a lot of juicing. I like making different drinks, so I think this drink is fun to make. And the best part is you can drink this with your whole family. The ingredients are fresh squeezed lemon juice, fresh squeezed orange juice, fresh squeezed lime juice, pineapple juice. I don't know how you squeeze pineapple juice, so it's not fresh squeezed. Just any pineapple juice will do. Grenadine, cinnamon syrup, demerara syrup, which is a kind of simple syrup. Basically, you could sub out simple syrup, and ginger ale. And so basically what you do is you take everything except for the ginger ale. Once you've got everything together, you take the time to squeeze all the fresh juice. And I didn't do this, but I imagine doing this with like my kids would be really fun. Squeeze a ton of fresh juice. And then, basically you use a cocktail shaker, shake up the fresh juices and the syrups with ice, pour them into like a Collins glass, like a tall glass. You can just use a big iced tea glass too if you have one. And and then top it with the ginger ale. And then throw some big fruit slices on there for garnish, like I don't know, 4 or 5 different ones, just to like garnish that thing. Yeah, I know. I thought that sounded like a really fun to make drink that might be more fun to make for people when you have them over to play games than maybe it is even to drink it. So that's our drink for tonight. Sometimes making it is more fun. You can find it on my Twitter right now. It just went live on Twitter, literally right now. And I'll post it after the show. And my rule on Holy Happy Hour is if you try the drink, you have to let me know. That's my rule. No one does, but that's the rule. All right, so let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and bring our guests on the show, and hopefully there's no technical difficulties with this part. Okay. I believe, even though Ryan, you're a little low on my screen here. There you go. I believe that Amelia and Ryan are with us now. How are both of you doing?
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot better than I was last week. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel comfortable saying why, or I mean?
Yeah. So I moved to a new house the weekend before this last weekend, and I did so while sick. And then Monday rolls around, and I ended up in the hospital with pneumonia, which was a lot of fun. But really, it's been about a week since then, actually, and I'm feeling a lot better. Got a little bit of stuff in my throat, but I think I should be fine for the next few hours.
So you've got like a nice raspy podcast voice for the next however long I guess that lasts for you.
Yeah, I mean, I could go real low like that if you need me to, but I don't want to go ASMR.
A little early in the evening for that, I think.
It is a little bit, yeah.
Right, for your sexy podcaster voice.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it's only 7:45 on the East Coast, so you got to wait a couple hours for that.
It's fine.
I really like that drink recipe. I don't know about you, but like I have a citrus juicer thing, and you like put the half of the orange in there and you like squeeze it, and there's something really, really satisfying about just like squeezing the crap out of some fruit. Like it's a very like cathartic experience. And so I think you're right. Making it probably is more fun in that case, because it just like, it just feels really good.
We're definitely of the same mind then, because I absolutely love juicing fruit, and I do it for like drinks all the time. And I have one of those things you're talking about, like with 2 different sizes, and mine has 2 different sizes, and you squeeze, and it is something about it, the way it's really satisfying.
Yeah.
See, I love juicing the fruits as well, but I'm very sad when I juice an orange and see how much is produced out of it, and I'm like, that's it. But what are you doing?
Like, what is the rest of this?
Where's the rest of this orange is huge, and I get like that little bit of orange juice out of one whole orange.
Does it make you appreciate the price of orange juice anymore when that happens?
I mean, in a way. I mean, I know there's mass production and capitalism involved, but
for like 5 minutes, and then I'm like, but where's my juice?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I didn't draw too much attention to it, but the 3 of us said we were going to talk about it on the show. But this is a alcohol-free drink,
Yes.
and so I'll just share with the audience, because I haven't talked about this on the show before, that it dawned on me, and I wish I never needed to, because I wish I had always thought of this from the beginning, but I didn't at first. Which is like, it's pretty important when you're having a show with guests and you're making alcohol cocktail drinks that are like inspired by the guest, to like have them consent to that. And I didn't do that at the very beginning of the show. It just didn't really occur to me. And which, for whatever it is, what it is. But after several episodes, I realized, that could be problematic for someone for a whole variety of reasons. Like, there's many reasons why that could be problematic for someone.
Yeah. So
I started asking people, which is a good thing, because there have been several people in the show who didn't want to have an alcoholic drink, was fine with a drink if it was not non-alcoholic, because they didn't drink or they are alcohol averse in some way. Plus, we did an episode for Suicide Prevention Month, and we had someone who was under 21 on the show, and so plus with that theme, I was not going to make an alcohol drink that week.
Sure.
But I did make a really fun. So it's actually been, honestly, in some ways, as fun for me to create drinks without alcohol as maybe even more fun in some ways, because it's like, it's kind of harder to make it.
It
fun.
stretches different muscles. Like you have to
Yeah.
think a little bit differently to do that. Like, okay, what am I going to do that's not just like, a can of Coke? Like,
Yeah.
like a virgin rum and Coke is just Coke.
Exactly. So yeah, I asked Amelia and Ryan if I could do that, and they asked to make it non-alcoholic. And so yeah, I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but we also thought this was a good example of safety tools. Actually, it turns out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that this was, so I know my response was like, first of all, I know that Ryan and I don't drink. I'm the kind of person that like, if other people want to around me, that's fine. Like you do you. It's a choice that I've made. I have a fraught family history. And, I'm on a whole list of medications that like are maybe better without it. But I also think that this is a good opportunity to have that discussion about, not safety tools are not just for what's happening during your game, but for what's happening at the table where you are all people at a game as well. Mm-hmm. I also think I like that it's a family-friendly cocktail because we are a family-friendly podcast.
Yeah.
Despite my efforts, Ryan makes sure that we are. But yeah, I think this is one of those situations where a lot of people don't think about, that asking that kind of question. And it was one actually that I watched last week too. And I thought, I should message him and just see if we can make it a virgin cocktail. And then, the week was the week and I didn't think to ask either. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there are some people for various reasons that are, kind of averse to that, or, like it is more of a safety thing to not be in a situation that involves alcohol, depending on where you're playing or what you're doing. I know for me, like when I go to conventions and things, even before I stopped drinking, I would not go out to bars and things because I am a woman on my own. And that is just a thing that did not feel safe to me. And so certainly depending on the game situation, that wouldn't feel comfortable to me to go to a table where alcohol is being served. So I think that's, a discussion to have with your group too, is, like lots of people love to have, sit around and have drinks and like, that's your fun time with your friends. And that's awesome. Like if that's the thing that you all consent to, that's great. I've been there. It's lots of fun. For me, it isn't a fun experience because there's like something super not fun about being the only sober person in the room. It's like kind of a lame place to be. But yeah, I think it's a good discussion, and I really appreciated being asked. It wouldn't have bothered me if if you had served a cocktail or anything, but then I would have been like, I hope that's really good. I will not be trying it. And then that awkward conversation of like, no, it's fine if you drink, but I don't, because I always feel like when you have to have that discussion out in the open too, when somebody's like, want to drink? And you're like, actually, I don't, but you can, it's fine. You're like, I don't want to ruin your fun. So having that kind of like very forward of like, is this okay? Yes or no? And not having to do that awkward passive aggressive dance of like, you can, but I won't, but I'd prefer if you didn't. Like, no, just say it.
Yeah. And I know for me, I've got kind of more of an aversion to the concept of alcohol. For whatever reason, it might have stemmed from my brother, being borderline alcoholic in a way. I know he got more into a lot of the heavier drugs and stuff. And he started mellowing out before he passed away, but I still think he was more heavily into that sort of stuff. And that probably kind of gave me that sort of like aversion, because like I didn't really look up to him much as I was growing up, because once he hit puberty, his whole demeanor towards me changed from loving brother to I don't want anything to do with you, and I'm also going to actively make your life miserable.
Yeah.
Right. So for about a decade or so, maybe not that long, maybe about 7 years or so, he had tormented me as an older brother is wont to do at times. And this was back in the 80s and 90s, so that was normal behavior back then. So when I see like advertisements for alcohol, or like if I'm scrolling through Twitter and an ad for alcohol pops up, it's an immediate block for me. Like, I just don't like seeing it. But if I'm at a table and people want to partake in consuming alcohol, I'm fine with that. The only thing I noticed, and thinking back on all the times I've had like this, it's prominent in my brain. Like if somebody's drinking a soda, I don't think about it. And there's Amelia going to drink a soda.
Yes, I'm drinking some Sprecher root beer, Wisconsin
Sprecher.
company. It's amazing. It's like my favorite kind of root beer.
Yep.
And I like to drink it as an adult because it looks like I'm drinking beer, but I'm not.
There you go.
And then I feel fancy. I feel like a grown-up.
Sometimes you need that actually to like kind of blend in a group of people who.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because like when I'm I do in-person gaming with my local groups from time to time. Much less now since, all the fun stuff in the world started. But one or two of the players, they'll bring out a beer or whatever. And I'm fine with it. But it's like in my active consciousness, like I look over and they're like, oh, they're drinking a beer. Not, oh, there's my friend that's playing this character.
It definitely like changes the like tone of the situation for you.
Yeah, but like on a very minor subconscious sort of level, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's more in my consciousness than it would be otherwise. So it's a little distracting, but it's not like I'm gonna say no, you can't do that around me because I feel gross about it, right?
Yeah. But I think it's important to note like that's a situation that I think could happen for a lot of people. I know a lot of friends who are sober, and to be in that situation where like, you feel kind of uncomfortable because everybody around you is doing that, and you're not okay with it, or it's like I don't want to be put in a situation where I had to face that kind of decision. Like depending on where you are in your journey of life. Because for me it was a decision that I made for myself, but for some people it's a decision that like more or less is made for them of like I'm going to do this or I'm going to die. And so like to not put people in that kind of situation without their consent I think is really important. And I think this was a very valuable discussion moment because I think we talk about the X card, we talk about lines and veils, we talk about that kind of stuff, and all of that relates to the story that we are as a group are telling, but we have to think about what's happening with us as people and not just as characters or players, but us as friends too.
Yeah, totally agree. I literally remember the first time I was in a ttrpg group gaming session where someone was drinking while playing. And this is funny, funny is not the right word for it, but now like I will drink with my friends while we play a lot, and the groups I tend to be in right now are people that also tend to drink, and they'll drink a lot at games sometimes, and I have a lot of thoughts about that maybe I won't say on the stream. I don't know.
It definitely I think affects the experience that you're having at the table too. Like the decision, like the games where you play and everybody's sober, and the games you play where everybody's like been drinking and they're all kind of drunk, which again, if you're all adults and you're all consenting to that and like that's what you want to do, go for it. We were just on a podcast where they talked about like having your boxed wine night, and like that's great, but you're definitely playing a different kind of game when you're doing that you are when you're sober. And so knowing that you've all consented to not only that experience of drinking alcohol, but that experience of, hey, our game's going to look a little different. Like that we're not going to play our serious emotional drama if we're having a boxed wine night.
Well, sure. That's true. Yeah. I mean, in that first session, I remember the person drank and we were, I was significantly younger. I was like in college, and I was not someone that really drank at that time in my life at all, and neither did anybody I hung out with at the time. So like we weren't like drinking college students so much at that point. We were sort of like just gaming college students, and for us that was a distinction. But the group we're at, and I part of the background is I went to a dry college too. My college was a dry campus. This was off campus, but we weren't used to like people drinking at these kinds of things because we went to a dry college. And I just remember the person drank too much and was intoxicated and was the only person drinking. And it got really uncomfortable and really awful. And like, it was such a bad memory, and it's related to that like D&D session we were playing. And like, for me, it's one of my earliest memories that I look back on now as like an experienced gamer. And I'm like, oh man, we did not have safety tools.
That could have gone differently.
Yeah. Like, we didn't talk about safety tools back then. We didn't have them at our disposal. I mean, we did probably, but like consciously, like we didn't bring them to our table. We didn't know about them, and it informed like my experience of safety in games, but it also informed like what you were saying. So like my understanding of safety tools being broader than just like, you know, I don't say just the X card, but you know, like than simply tools at the table, but outside, like like you said, the whole experience of coming together and like having consent on every level of that experience for safety is really important. We don't know what people are struggling with, right? And
right.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I mean, and I think the other thing that we've talked about on our show too is the reminder that these need to be consistent and constant discussions, like ongoing and enthusiastic consent, right? Like it applies to games as well. And, you know, there are, you don't know what people are coming in with, and you don't know what they're coming in with that day. So it could be very much like, you know what, today is not the day to do that, you know, or like today I really do need a drink, you know, and just making sure that you're kind of checking in on those things. And I know one thing in this discussion that I really want to stress to people is that those conversations don't have to be awkward. You don't have to like hand somebody a survey and be like, I need you to fill out each of these options. It's just like, hey, are you cool with this? Like that can be yes or no can be the extent of it. If you want to have a long discussion about like where you're at and why you're there, go for it. But sometimes it really can just be like, hey, are you good? Okay. You know, like a small check-in. Like the safety stuff doesn't have to be, you know, an hour-long debrief before you start every session. It doesn't have to halt your session. It doesn't have to any of that. Like it can just be quick little moments of like, are we good?
Yeah. And especially if you're playing with an established group, then you can take that time at the beginning to go through multiple sort of things and multiple checklists and all that sort of stuff. And then you're set. I'll put quotes around that, set for the foreseeable future. Obviously you want to do check-ins though every now and then, because things can change. You know, people can have new experiences that might produce some sort of trauma that they may or may not want to deal with in a game. So checking in and saying, hey, is there anything that's changed? Is there anything we want to add to the list? Anything we want to remove from the list? What are we thinking here? And you can keep those conversations kind of normalized, so that way it's a lot more comfortable to just say, hey, I know we've been playing this really heavy campaign, but this thing that feels like it's coming up is not going to be too great for me. So can we put it in a veil, or can we just cut that out of the story?
Or even just entirely. Like, can we handle this with care?
Yeah.
You know, I had that discussion in one of my games at one point and said, like, somebody said, like, I want to bring this thing, I want to do this. And I said, okay, but, you know, like, this is something that has the potential to get kind of touchy for me.
Yeah.
So can we just, like, proceed with caution and sort of continually check in and, you know, like, understand that this is something that, like, I may need to stop, or, you know, or just to, like, inform the other person, like, be careful what you're doing with this, you know, like, treat it carefully, because it might be hard for me, rather than, like, just, you know, saying, no, I don't want to see it. Or, because sometimes there are those things where it's like, okay, you know, it could be fine. But I think having that discussion was just like, just so you know, it might not be.
And if you're not used to like all this the off the cuff sort of like conversations like that. That's what the actual safety tools are useful for. Like the let's take it slow is literally part of the script change safety tool, right? To slow the scene down, to do multiple check-ins, to take things slow through the scene so we can tell the story that we want, to explore these more maybe personal or close to harmful scenes, but something that will really enhance the story in everybody's eyes. Because why wouldn't you be wanting to enhance the story if you're going to be exploring these things? You just need to understand that you can go through and slow it down and use these tools and just follow the rules of the tool, basically. And you can do what you need to get through it.
So you mentioned script change. Bo Sheldon came on the show and talked about script change a few months ago. What are other, and we talked about the X card was named in this conversation. We talked about the X card. What are some other safety tools that like are tools like that people can just have available for their games at any time they're needed for somebody, to break out and use?
Yeah, there's so many different tools that are out there. But really it's all up to personal, preference, right? Because, for one of my games, I modified script change to be a verbal script change, basically. So it turned into a director's chair, thing. So you would say director's chair, so it's like cut, rewind, all this sort of stuff. And basically it does the exact same stuff as script change, but it's something different. There's like the red, yellow, green light system where you hold up an object of that color and that'll tell you. Red says, hey, let's stop. Let's figure out what's going on. Yellow's kind of slow down. We're kind of approaching something that's kind of dicey for me. And green is the enthusiastic consent, like saying, I know it's troubling or problematic, but I'm loving this. Let's keep going. The
lines and veils, I think, is one that more and more people I'm seeing more and more places. And, like, is brought up at a lot of the convention games that I play, almost as much as the X card at this point, which is saying a line is saying, like, this is something I'm not okay with. Like, this, do not bring it up. Veils are things that are potentially uncomfortable or something that you're like, I see it usually described a lot of times for like sex scenes or things like that, where people say like, okay, this is the point where we fade to black and we just sort of assume what happened. We're not going to openly discuss it.
Right.
I usually say that one of my sort of veils is I am okay with body horror. Do not describe to me what sound it makes.
Yeah.
Like that is my veil. Like, you can tell me what it looks like. Don't tell me what it sounds like. And so is kind of saying, I'm okay with this thing up to a point. And that one I think is one it's really easy to just make a list at the beginning of the game and say, like, these things are out. Like, for sure, don't bring those up. I know that one some people are kind of uncomfortable with because you don't always want to say what your no's are. I know a lot of times I will like pass out a sheet or like make a Google Doc or something like that where people can type them in so they don't have to openly say in front of me, like, this is my thing that's a no. Because that can be awkward for people.
Usually it's an anonymous pass to like the GM or whatever. And then the GM facilitates saying, hey, here's our lines. Here's our veils. Or if it's like, online, which is a lot more prominent nowadays, you can just create that shared doc and then anonymously put in your lines and veils. Right. And then you've got them there.
So for the first time I did it online, I said at the beginning of the show, next week we're playing Manish Tana. And we recorded that already, so we already did the playing. It's going to be played next week. But so in that game session, though, we did a shared Google spreadsheet that was made for our game session, and you could check line, it was like check boxes for, it was actually I've never seen this before. There was sort of pre-given list of possible things that might be lines and veils for you, which I thought was really helpful, because maybe I didn't think this one thing would be, but actually, yes, now that I read that, oh, that is something I don't want to have I didn't, because not everybody walks up to the table with their list of what their lines and veils are already in their head, like ready to go. They might not realize, they might not think to include something in that. So I thought that was really helpful. I thought that was a really cool experience. And it gave me some new ones to just include all the time whenever I have, am asked about lines and veils. I am curious what you would recommend doing in a situation where you're in a GM-less game and you want to do lines and veils, but you're afraid maybe to have everyone just sort of share with everybody their line, I guess, their line items, the ones that aren't veils, but like their hard line items.
I mean, I think you can do, like we talked about, like a past piece of paper or something like that, that you can just, but obviously, like, depending on what you're doing, like, you can recognize people's handwriting, and you can, like, there are ways to figure it out. I kind of would encourage everybody to be like, that's a stupid use of your time. Trying to, analyze people's handwriting to find out what their traumas are is like, don't do that.
No.
But I think that's where some of those other safety tools come in, things like script change or the X card or things like that, where you say, like, now that we're here, or like, I didn't want to say it up front, but like, I can tell that it's coming, or now that we're here, or, and, to kind of encourage people to say, like, well, like, I know that this is a thing that potentially bothers a lot of people, even though it doesn't bother me. Maybe I'll just write it down just in case. Because then somebody else doesn't have to. And it's like, depending on what that thing is, did we really need it in a game? That's something like, okay, maybe nobody at my table said, like, oh, I'm not okay with sexual violence, but like the majority of people are probably going to be like, no, I'm not okay with that. I'm going to write it down because we just don't need it in our game anyway.
Yeah.
And I think, like, it's probably okay for you as a person to come into a game with a canned list of, like, I don't need this. The game that I was going to run at a catacon, Arium Create, actually has a section at the very beginning. I can't remember what they call it, but it's like just your nose. And it's not necessarily X card or lines and veils or anything like that. It's just things that I'm just like not feeling. So like, I played it with a friend and I wrote in there, I do not want to talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because I don't want to.
Yeah.
And so you can also have something like that where it's not only are these my traumas or these things that will trigger me or whatever, but these are also things that I'm just like, I just don't care for.
I love that.
Like today I am putting down the Dallas Cowboys because I just don't care for them. Fine, great, do it. So I think that's also a useful way to handle that, is to just say, like, this doesn't sound fun to me.
I love that. I've been designing a Questlandia hack called Bizlandia, which we play tested for the first time on Saturday, so it's fresh in my. And if anyone's been play testing, and some people on this call might be play testing their own games, you get stuck in your head, you can't stop thinking about certain aspects of it. At least that's how I am. Anyway,
yes.
But it's a comedy game. Because it's like a workplace situational comedy game. It's kind of like The Office, but a game, right?
Yeah.
But like, we played it for the first time on Saturday, and it's the first time I think I've ever played that's not true, but it's one of the first just straight up comedy games I played, where it's like, this is always meant to be a comedy game. For a comedy game like that, having a list of like no's right at the beginning might be so smart, because it's like, here's just what I don't want to. We're about to do a whole bunch of world building together and stuff. Here's a bunch of things I just do not want these in this.
I thought it was a really fun like mechanic, and just a way to sort of like shape, like, okay, especially when you're walking into something that you're doing world building or something like that, where it's wide open. I think I wrote down one time prominent woodland themes, because it was like, I just don't want to deal with the forest today. And like, fine, there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't have to be a negative or a bad thing. It can just be like, nah.
Yeah. Well, and that's going back to our discussion with Alex Roberts way back when we first started our podcast.
Yeah, when we were a baby podcast.
Series 3, and we're on to what, 45 now or something like
to
that?
do 45 next weekend.
Yeah. So back in Series 3, we had a conversation on consent with Alex Roberts, and it was talked about. It's like safety tools, X cards, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't have to be just for safety. It can be for less than ideal things. And that really struck a chord with me. Like, I'm not feeling that this is the best choice that we could be making in this situation. It's not a bad choice by any means, but maybe we can do better. Maybe what about this instead? Maybe I want this for my character more than this other suggestion that was just put on the table.
And I think that's a thing that, like, I always want to stress about safety tools too, is that, like, the point of them is to make your game fun. Yeah. Games should be fun. We are not spending this time scheduling spreadsheets to find 15 minutes with our friends to not have fun.
Yeah.
And so anything that you can do to make this the most optimal experience for everyone at the table, you absolutely should do, because we are adults and finding time is hard. Like, make sure that is a good use of your time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I see that we have a question, what an X card is, in the chat.
Yeah. Great question. Not a dumb question at all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it Aerox Drums? Thank you for the question. That's awesome.
Yeah, so basically an X card is a physical card. Usually a lot of people use an index card, but there's actually some playing cards that have just an X on it. You set this card, or multiple versions of this card, around the table within arm's reach of everybody. And when something happens in the game that somebody doesn't agree with or is a safety concern, they can tap the X card. They just tap the X card, and then play stops. And then you rewind, you take out the problematic content, and then you continue play. You can have a discussion if you like, but it's generally a no questions asked. We will take out whatever was problematic, and we will continue on with the story. Or we'll have a discussion if we can continue on, if it was that bad of a safety concern.
It's a tool basically to say, like, you know, no questions asked. Like, we all at the table agree that if somebody says no, it means no.
Yeah. That
nobody else at the table can say, well, come on, it wasn't that bad. It was, you know, like, why are you upset or something like that? Like, the agreement by putting an X card on the table is, if somebody taps it and says, like, this is not okay with me, it makes me uncomfortable, everyone goes, cool. We move on. Yeah. If you want to have, like Ryan said, if you want to have a discussion about why that was problematic so that you can kind of make sure to avoid it in the future, I think sometimes that discussion is helpful. But depending on what the content is, sometimes people just are like, I don't want to get into it. I'm just not okay with it. And everybody kind of says, okay, cool, onward. So it's a kind of a tool to stop things when they aren't going well, and it's also sort of a social contract between everybody at the table that, like, this stops it. This is, you know, we don't need to have a discussion of, like, well, it wasn't that bad and now you're ruining my play, but my character definitely would do that anyway. Like, nope, done, stop.
Yeah.
X.
And the X card's kind of like the precursor for a lot of these safety tools, because you'll notice a very prominent theme throughout a lot of the tools is there's something on the table and you touch what you want to have happen, right? So the X card has also evolved into an X card, an O card, and some other symbol as well. I think the O card means, like, enthusiastically consenting towards whatever's happening, and then the other card's like, hey, let's slow down. But in all cases, between the X card, between script change, between the support flower, all that sort of stuff, you've got a whole bunch of things that you can have in play, probably not at the same time, because that might get confusing. But if you agree to one of them, then you can just go and touch the one that you feel is appropriate in that moment.
I just put a link into the chat to the Google Doc that has sort of like the history and explanation of the X card too, in case anybody wants that information.
Great, and that'll be in the show notes later when this is a permanent YouTube video and whatever it'll be. I'll make sure it gets into the show notes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question though, because that's something that sort of we like industry people, like I don't know, are we industry people, Ryan? We don't.
I mean, technically, yeah.
But sort of kind of take for granted because like everybody knows what an X card is. More and more games are putting them in the rules, like right at the beginning, or physical games are providing like an actual copy of the card.
Well, even virtual tabletop games now. There's a lot of VTTs that have built-in safety cards. I know Roll20's got them built in now, where you can actually just have a safety card and it's 100% anonymous. Like you can throw that card out there and you only know if you see the card pop up and you didn't do it, you only know it wasn't you that did it.
Yep.
Right.
I love that. I love that. And that's one of the things I think about with safety tools a lot is that online gaming has sort of changed like the dynamics a lot. The technology is just so different.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. And I think potentially though also like has it made the need for some of those safety tools a little bit higher because it increases the potential that you're playing with people that you don't know. Or the way the experience happens is a little bit different too. Like I'm in my own home, but I don't necessarily know the people that I'm playing with or what I'm getting into or stuff like that too. So I think the way we talk about safety tools definitely is going to depend on the situation that you're playing in too. The way you handle those issues is very different if you're playing with a group of your friends that you've been playing with for years and years and years, and they know you and they, like I mentioned the body horror thing. We were playing a game last night and our GM started to like describe the sounds. And I said, stop, what is my rule? Like we didn't have a discussion about this before the game, but he was like, you're right. No sounds. Sorry. And like, so when I'm playing with friends, they know those things. And I can do that and be like, come on, dude, don't. But when you're playing with people that you don't know, it's a very different, like I have to stop and like explain, okay, like I don't like it if you do the thing,
You make a good point, and I think it's worth saying that there was a time maybe in the hobby where most of the people that you played with were your group of friends. I think we're at a point in the hobby where that's not the case anymore by like large margins, whether that's online play or con play or game club play, whatever. I run a game club on Saturday nights. And so I never know who's going to walk through the door. I'm going to role play with people I've never met before. It's going to happen all the time. It's so important. Like, plus I run a club. Like, I can't have someone have a bad experience. You know what I mean? Like I have a lot of, it's really important that it always is, but I have like extra motivation at running a club to make sure that nobody walks away having a bad experience. And my club's in a church. So like,
you definitely don't want them walking away then. Come back.
Yeah, right. But like also if the church isn't the safest place to play games and we do to go back to the beginning of this conversation, I was thinking about this when we're talking about it, like we do have alcohol at our game club and man, I've gone back and forth about that. I've gone back and forth about that because it's like we keep it in a place that's out of sight. And we do that very intentionally and we present because we have rules because we're a church around how alcohol ought to be treated, and so we follow those rules. But like, inviting. So like I guess safety tools in some ways are the opposite, right? Of inviting problems, they're like inviting good situations.
Right.
So like you said, I really like the point that it's not just about preventing bad things from happening, but it's about like. I forget how you said it with the conversation with Alex Roberts, but like
making sure that you're having the optimal experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And I think depending on the situation, like I think in your situation too, it opens the door to have really positive conversations and positive interactions with people and say that like, this is a safe space. And I am the kind of person that you can have these discussions with too.
Yeah.
Like depending on what the purpose of your gaming is, to be able to say that like, look, I respect those things about you, and I respect your needs, and I am someone that you can come to with these things because I have already put that out there and said, like, I care about you. I talked in our session 0 episode, your RPG group is a relationship. It is another form of a relationship, and your session 0 should be your first date. And, you know, the safety tools are part of your ongoing consent. And you want to present to the people in your group that this is a safe and healthy relationship to have, that you are there to listen to them, that you, in turn, expect them to listen to you, that you are setting those boundaries for yourself. Because that is one of the healthiest things that you can do in a relationship too, right? And so I think, you know, it's sort of meta to be like, it's a relationship, but it is. You know, any interaction you have with other people is a kind of relationship. But setting those things clearly right away and sort of signposting those expectations is good. It's helpful. I think we've all like been in relationships, whether with friends or family members or significant others, where you like didn't know what they wanted. And it's extremely stressful. Like, so I think it does help it to be that optimal experience to say up front, here's what we're doing, friends. Here's how it's going to be. And then to ask, like, is that okay?
And that's the cool thing about safety tools, especially like lines and veils and stuff, and talking about things ahead of time, is you're not using them solely to eliminate certain topics from your game. You're using them to feel comfortable to push boundaries in games. Like if you're playing a horror game, like a one shot, especially, or a campaign, goodness, safety tools are almost a must. But you can really push the boundaries of horror and really get that really good reaction from your players or from the GM, based on not only what not to talk about, but if you add like one thing I personally love to do, lines and veils are for sure, but then add a fears column where it's stuff that your players are like, this gives me the heebie-jeebies for sure, but I'm fine playing with it, you know? And then you lean into that as a GM, and goodness, it just ups the fear factor of the whole session immensely without having to do much more work. Actually, they're handing you basically story candy to play with. And my goodness, it really is a great feeling knowing you can lean into that. And if you lean too hard as a player or a GM, there's those tools to say, hey, let's take a step back. We went a little too far into this fear. Maybe we can remove it or change it or whatever. But having those safety tools in place invites that conversation to happen, right?
That goes along with that, like we talked about the traffic light thing of like the sort of like, okay, yellow being like, we're approaching something that might be uncomfortable, and the red being a hard stop. But the green is, yes, this is great, continue. And I think that is an important thing that we should talk about in safety tools too, is that they can lead to that optimal experience that like, this is great, I love it, keep going, I'm having so much fun. And leaving room for those kinds of like creepy moments, but knowing that I'm safe. I love to play dramatic games. I love a really good emotional experience. I like to explore those places with my characters that it's like, this thing never would have happened to them before. Like, what does that look like when, you know, something scary happens, or, you know, this, like, you've witnessed death for the first time. How do you react? And as a player, I need to know that the space that I'm playing in is safe to be able to really lean into those kinds of moments. Because I think we can have kinds of like fun, silly games, and those are great, and, you know, don't necessarily require quite the same safety tools that some of the dramatic and scary games do. But it's also a very different kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when you want to have those really deep character moments, you need those safety nets underneath you to say, like, okay, I feel safe getting closer to that edge because I know that if I step over it, someone will catch me.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that is an argument that I make for safety tools a lot, especially with people who are like, I've been playing with the same friends for 15 years. We're on like year 10 of our D&D campaign. Like, we don't need safety tools now. And it's like, you're right. You've probably been getting away with them fine. And, you know, there's a feeling like, why do I need to bother bringing in something else?
Mm-hmm.
You might not need them. The hope is that you don't. It's, you know, much like an emergency room. I hope I don't need to go there. Mm-hmm. But boy, am I glad that it's there when I do.
Yeah.
Can I just...
And so like having things like the X card and script change and things like that, if you never touch them, if you have them at your table and you never, like nobody ever looks at them, cool. I'm really glad that you have a group that feels comfortable and everybody's having an awesome time. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But you know what? It doesn't hurt to have them there. It's not making anybody's time less fun to have a card with an X on it on the table. Like, I mean, if it is, I have really, really strange questions to ask you. Like,
that's where I think
is that a phobia? Is that a weird thing that they have? Who hurt them? But like, it's good if it's there. It's awesome. It's amazing if you don't need it. But boy, will you be glad when you do.
I would offer that if someone has a 10-year-long D&D game they've been playing with their friends, there's almost no way that you could ask, if you asked everybody in that group, was there ever a time that something happened in this group over 10 years that made somebody like uncomfortable or unhappy? Like, of course, they're all going to remember something like that. Right. Like, there's almost no way.
I'm glad that your friendship survived it.
Exactly.
But let me tell you how you don't have to have that.
Exactly. And sometimes, unfortunately, you know, in a group of friends, like, you get pressured into, like, not bringing up the thing that bothers you. And, like, that's
yes.
That's where the safety tools are so important for that. For people.
Right. Yeah, and that's, you know, that's the importance of everybody agreeing to it, too, is like, not only do I want you to have an X card on your table, but I want you to have a discussion with your group about the fact that, like, this is a thing we're going to use. And if anybody has a problem with it, there's a further discussion that needs to happen because like, what is it about this that is ruining your experience to that point? And I think I said it in our safety episode too, that like, I think as a player, if you sit down to a table and people are not okay with using safety tools, you should be asking some questions about whether that's a table you want to be at. I'm not going to tell anybody like your group sucks and you need to leave. Like that's, you know, you decide what you're comfortable with. But I, as a person, if I sat down at a table and they were like, we're not doing that because the X card is stupid and, you know, like, I don't want you to be woke, which is an argument that I have heard from people about why they don't want to do it, that it ruins the fun or whatever. To me, that would go, who's fun? Because it sounds like not mine. And like my fun isn't what you're considering here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a safety question.
Yeah. You want to have the whole table having fun, not just yourself or the people that you personally know or whatever.
Yeah. Because like knowing somebody at my table isn't having fun is concerning to me. Like whether I'm the player or the GM. Like if I'm at a game and somebody in my group isn't having a good time, that should be a concern for everybody.
Yep,
because that's why we're here. That's the entire reason that we're here.
Yeah.
Is to have fun.
And that's not to say you can't not have fun while playing the game.
Right.
If you're playing a heavy dice game like D&D and your rolls are just horrible that night and now half your party's dead and it's all your fault because you couldn't roll well enough. And it's like, yeah, you're not going to enjoy it.
Right.
That it
right.
probably
Yes, like bad nights are still gonna happen.
Yeah, bad nights are still going to happen, but that doesn't mean that, you know, it's a reason to stop and wipe everything away, right? It's a, let's examine this. Why am I not having fun, right? Am I not having fun just because luck's not on my side? Is the story fine and I'm just not having a great night? Did I have a bad day at work and now I'm feeling like things are not the greatest at the table here because my day was bad? You know, it's having these safety tools on the table lets you not only have a better time playing with your friends, but it also gets that thought into your head of, let me self-examine why I'm not having a good time. And if I say, oh, I'm not having a good time because this thing in the story is just kind of gross, then you can stop it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think, you know, that's a discussion, another safety discussion about expectations in a game.
Yeah.
You know, we just did our Call of Cthulhu episodes, and that was one of the things that I brought up. A lot of times when we talk with designers or, you know, like podcasters or whoever, we ask the question, what is the best thing about this game and what is the worst thing? And a lot of times what they'll say is the worst thing is like a thing that it's just like, well, if you wanted this from a game, this game doesn't do that.
Interesting.
And it's like, well, okay, that's not a bad thing about the game. That's a bad thing about picking that game. But going into a game, knowing what the expectations are can also be a safety thing. Because if I am in a place where, like, you know, my depression's really bad and I'm feeling like crap about myself all of the time, and, you know, like, and I'm going into a game where all of my dice rolls have a high rate of failure, like, no,
maybe just not. And
that's going to ruin my fun.
Yeah. And in that sort of case, it's okay to say, okay, I know we're scheduled for every Friday, 8 p.m. We get together, we play RPGs for 3 hours. And I know we got this cool campaign going on, but my goodness, I am not feeling it.
I can't do horror this week, or
can we do something else? And that opens the table for that sort of discussion, right? To say, okay, maybe we play Fiasco or something that doesn't matter, a one shot of something, to something new to try out, maybe a board game, maybe we just watch a movie. But either way, you can have those sorts of conversations when you're used to having those sorts of conversations all the time around these safety tools and your wants and not wants in the game.
Yeah. And I think, like, being open about those expectations is, you know, like, I think when we talk about this stuff, we use the word safety. And, you know, we think physical safety, which is not really, you know, in some cases it is. In some cases it's about, like, you know, playing with people, you know, in a place that's safe, you know, like, is there alcohol, all of that kind of stuff. But some of it is emotional safety, and some of it is just a matter of well-being and like quality of life. And, you know, understanding expectations and saying, like, for me right now, like, I'm not in a good place, and I don't think playing a role-playing game about horror with a lot of risk of failure, like, I just don't feel like I can emotionally handle that right now.
Like, I can't even imagine playing a game like Bluebeard's Bride not being in a good headspace. Right. Because, oh my, that game is, like,
it's intense. Intense.
So intense.
Knowing what you're getting into is part of the safety.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and going in with the expectations of, okay, we know what this game is about. If your GM is one who does a lot of prep ahead of time, you could, and if you're one of those GMs, you can have content warnings of potential stuff that might come up this session, right? And so that way you can say, okay, I think we're going to be leaning into extreme body horror this episode. I mean, this session. You talking like a podcaster here.
Everything's an episode.
I know, everything's an episode. So we're going to lean into extreme body horror. Is that okay? Do I need to tone it down? Is there anything that I should avoid entirely, knowing that that's on the table? Right. Mm-hmm. And that might be like a person's going to be turning into a werewolf this session. So maybe I just say, and they turn into a werewolf, or maybe I go into those disgusting sort of things that you can talk about and maybe not sounds in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah, but like you said, some games you can't imagine not having them for. Like we played 10 Candles a lot at my game club because it's like a favorite game of that for people. But like I can't imagine going into that game in certain headspaces, right? Like there's certain headspaces you could not play a game like that in. And I think that's really important. Like kind of like the fictional 10-year D&D game we made up just now of these people who've been playing together for 10 years. Like they have been doing this in my fictional headcanon for these people. They've been doing safety tools all along without realizing it. Because they've been agreeing and consenting to things they were going to do together. Yeah. And they just didn't realize they were using safety tools.
Well, and
which I think is a valid point, too, is that, like, I think, we talk about these things, and it's really easy to go, like, oh, great, like, more rules to remember, and, like, more stuff I got to bring in and explain to me. And it's like, no, I think, like, the X card, chances are, in your group, if somebody went, no, you'd be like, okay, I would hope. This is just formalizing it, and basically by using those formal tools, giving people permission, like because, like blanket permission to do those things and to say like, absolutely yes, this is okay. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that can't just say no, right? That have been conditioned their whole life that saying no to something is not good. You need to be a people pleaser or whatever.
Yes.
Right. So saying no is harder than just touching a card.
Right. And and like I said, putting that card out there says, I give you permission to do this.
Exactly.
Yes.
Whereas like when I'm at a table, like technically, I could say no, but like depending on who you're playing with, it's like, well, I don't want to be a bummer. I don't want to like, what if they don't like me or, whatever. When you put that X card on the table, you say, you're allowed to say no.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I've seen is GMs like at cons and stuff, they put the X card on the table and then they explain it and then they go through the start of the game and then they bake in a personal use of the X card to like show like as an impromptu.
Oh, I love that.
Thing. So like they'll say, and this person is named this, and oh wait, I don't like that name. I'm going to tap the X card and it reminds me of whatever, and so I'm going to change the name. Let's change it to this instead. And they can bake that into their prep, right?
Yeah. So now you are not the first person to use it. The person running the game, have said, like, and
I did it to myself.
I've made it okay. I've ruined my own ideas. So like, you're not like, I'm not going to be mad if you're doing it to me. Yeah. All of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm seeing more and more podcasts too, leaving that kind of stuff in. A lot of actual plays will they won't edit that part out, and I really appreciate that. Like as a listener, to be like, oh, okay, I know that you're playing it safely, and I've seen what that mechanic looks like and everything.
Yeah, I was literally just thinking about that, Amelia. Where the question I've had as someone who makes actual play podcasts is that question of leave in or leave it or take out safety tool conversations. And I'm of two minds about it because on the one hand, like because APs a lot of times function in such a way to like show people how games are played. Like that's like, people like that's a really important function I think of APs is like, oh, I can learn about this game. I can see. And also it sets cultural tones for the whole hobby, right? Like, so like, setting the cultural tone that this stuff is acceptable and okay can have like a ripple effect into people's home games. So that's, on the one hand, that I think is super important and good. On the other hand, right, and maybe you'll always know this with your group or maybe you just talk about it, but like, if it, like, maybe you don't want it out there, you know what I mean?
If
like
somebody just said no to this, do I want to put it out in the world?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that becomes another consent discussion then, right? If
Yeah.
we're playing for an actual play,
Yeah.
you know, like I think if you're the person editing it, I think it behooves you to go to that person and say, hey, are you okay if I leave this in as an example?
Yeah.
Right.
Or do you prefer that because you said no is no?
Yeah.
Like, are you comfortable with people knowing that's a line for you?
Yeah, I mean, this
So-
is where... Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
I did this exact thing as an editor for a Horror Borealis. They did a mini series called Losers: A Love Story, which is they went through the Stephen King's It story using the Monster of the Week supplement Back to Dairy by Christine Priebus. And basically, if you know anything about Stephen King's It, there's a lot of horror in that book, in that movie, in that mini series. There's a lot that goes on there. So there was a discussion that was had of like, okay, how much of the safety discussion do we keep in, right? And we found a balance to, like, you know, keep the stuff that makes sense to keep, and then there's like little things that are reiterating stuff that we've already kept in previously, right? And then it went from that to the later episodes when everybody was really into it. They would call out like, okay, this is a safety thing, but they would say to me, Ryan, don't put that in. And you know, and then I wouldn't. And it's an interesting, like when you're not doing a live stream or something like that, when you have something that you can edit down and whatnot, it's interesting to go from that actual play to presenting that actual play, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that can go on behind the scenes, and yeah, keeping a lot of that safety stuff is really important, I think. But if it's all a lot of check-ins and stuff like that, which Losers: A Love Story was, tons of check-ins. They played some of the safest like horror that I can even. They did a fantastic job with between 7 players all playing and GMing at the same time. Like the safety was off the charts, and like it was such an honor.
So safe.
It was so safe. Like seriously, it was so safe. Like so many times it was like this person just played Pennywise and they were terrifying. But then right after like all the terrifying stuff happened, it was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. And
Please still be my friend.
please. There's like, no, it was great. It was great. Keep going. So you've got all of that sort of discussion going on, and it was a really interesting experience having to edit that, not being a participant
Yeah.
of the creation of all that stuff. So
I think that like early discussion stuff for sure I would want to leave in, especially as a listener. It's really nice to be like, okay, I know that these are the lines that they've put in place and I feel safe listening, knowing that these aren't going to come up. You know, the sort of like check-in X card one-off kind of thing is like a little bit different of a question of like, okay, you know, does everybody need to know that was, you know, a thing that I wasn't okay with? And, you know, like by putting it in the show, are we introducing it anyway, even though somebody said no? Okay, should we like, you know, so I think that's probably one of those questions that's like each time you have to ask yourself, like, is this okay? And, you know, probably talk to the person and say like, are you okay with this being in the world? Yeah. Because, you know, I'm the kind of person that I'm like, I'm pretty open with how I feel about things. Like, I don't think anybody would accuse me of like keeping my opinion to myself or not saying what I'm thinking. So I'm fine with that kind of stuff. But, you know, I know other people are like, no, I don't think the world needs to know that.
Right.
So.
Exactly. Yeah. And what we ended up doing after a couple of episodes, we had a note from one of our listeners that said, hey, can I get some timestamps for some of these content warnings? Because we would always have the episode edited, And then a cold open would come on saying, hey, here's what you can expect this episode. Here's the content warnings. But we didn't have timestamps at that point. So then eventually what happened is we, as I was editing, I would mark the problematic content. And then once the episode was done, I had all those timestamps. So we just dumped those into the show notes and said, hey, here's the content warnings. Go to the show notes. It has the beginning and the ending timestamp for all of the stuff that you might want to avoid. So then you could just go to that and skip right to like, oh, I don't want to hear this body horror.
Yeah, because it's like somebody can be like, this episode has eyeballs, and you're like, great, can't listen to the whole episode. And it's like, like one 10-minute segment in the middle of the episode.
Yeah, there's like you were talking about an aversion to sounds of things happening. My gosh, don't listen to the series, Amelia, because it's there's a lot that I did that I don't regret, but a lot of people probably regret that I did it. Just because it's a horror show and there's a lot of bad sounds. But you can skip over all of those, right? In that sort of situation, which is kind of a veil, right? So if you're going for like, I know this content's going to happen in our game, I want to skip over it. We can put a veil on it and just let's fast forward a bit. That's part of the script change. Let's fast forward past this portion, say it happened. I'm fine with it being in our story. I just do not want to experience it or discuss it or talk about it, right?
Yeah. I learned the lesson that you're talking about the hard way, and I still am not as... I still think I can learn to improve on it, which is content warnings. For my podcast, Delinquent Comics, like we had some stuff where we've done a bunch of safety stuff that isn't on the show because, we just chose not to include it. Right. But then, we didn't content warn well enough. Some of that content that then was in the show, and we had to learn that lesson the hard way from listeners who, and then, again, it added a whole nother layer to the way I think about safety tools, which is like, this became a shared experience because we broadcast it out to the universe in a podcast, and so to let them be a part of the safety by allowing them to consent to the experience as well.
That one's really hard because it's like we can't content warning everything, because you really don't know, and that's I keep going back to the X card of like. That's what the X card is for. It's for those times when you didn't know that was going to be a line for you. And then when you add in a whole worldwide audience of people that I for sure don't know what everybody's lines are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what my lines next week are. They might be different than they are today.
Yeah.
And so, that's a really intriguing problem.
A good piece of advice given to me when that happened was like, if it's something you'll have a conversation around with your players in cast, it's probably worth content warning it. And I think that's a really good and handy rule. It's so much easier, I think, in some ways. There's some things that it's easy to know what it is, right? Like horror, things around sex, like we talked about. Like there's some that are like we kind of all know that could be an issue. Yeah. And then there's others that we just are really harder to call and anticipate and to know what it is an issue. Or until it's explained to you and then you're like, oh gosh, now I totally see it. But
you recorded the episode months ago and since then a global pandemic started and we didn't know that was going to be a problem for people, and now the storyline feels weird and it's hard. People making stuff is hard. And it's hard to get it right. And I think I keep saying that's a thing I want people to know. But that would be another thing about safety tools too, is that you might not get them right the first time. You might use a safety tool and somebody might still get uncomfortable. And I don't want people to be like, well, this was useless. Maybe you need a different tool. Maybe the way that you used it didn't work. Maybe it wasn't the right tool for that person or at that time or that game. I think different games require different tools. I certainly want a higher level of safety tool when I'm playing a horror game than I do when I'm, playing Honey Heist or something.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of bears. But
maybe you don't want to play Honey Heist.
Right, Honey Heist is not the game for you. but like kind of keep refining the way that you have those discussions with people. Again, it's a relationship. We grow, we learn, we become better people, we become better friends. We become a better role-playing group.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if we can all find time on our Saturdays to sit down and actually play.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was
just
like
lots of nodding.
That was a good. Yeah, you put a good period on that. I was trying to decide also mentally how much more time we had, and whether or not to keep things going here. Behind the scenes in my mind. Well, I'd like to. I think that's a good place for us to sort of stop talking about safety tools, because we could go. That went really fast. We could go on, and there's probably a lot more that could be said about it. But I also want to give you guys a chance to opportunity to just sort of talk about you a little bit and what you're working on and where you're at out there. So in whoever is more enthusiastically consenting to talking about themselves. Yeah.
Let Ryan go first. I feel like, right?
Yeah,
or were you going to say me?
I was going to say.
Could I throw out a few resource links for the audience? So one of the things that we did as a podcast at Character Creation Cast is we created a Session 0 document that allows you to you can use what you want from that. And now you can probably hear my old fridge being brought down into the room that I'm in. Because my fridge is being delivered right now.
Just now?
Just now, yeah.
It was supposed to be like 2.5 hours ago.
It was. It's fine.
Well, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's fine. But we created a Session 0 document at session0.charactercreationcast.com. It goes right to our Google Doc that has a whole bunch of resources and links and whatnot in there. I'll post a link in the chat here. 0.charactercreationcast.com. I know it's a long URL, but I promise you it's worth it.
It is, because I made it look beautiful earlier today.
It's gorgeous, yeah.
Looks really nice.
So basically, it has a whole bunch of links in there and a whole bunch of advice on how to kind of approach your group with like what sort of themes we're going to play, what sort of content we're going to play, what sort of safety tools we want to utilize. And there's a bunch of links in there to some of the really good staples for safety tools. A couple that I really want to point out is one of the I think it's an Emmy award-winning safety toolkit. That's the ttrpg safety toolkit by Kiana Shaw and Lauren Bryant Monk. It's phenomenal. It's a Google Drive folder that has a whole bunch of really great safety tool resources in there. If you don't check out anything, just one thing from this document, check that out at least, because it has some fantastic resources in there for you. Another thing, we hinted on it a little bit about the whole checklists of things that you might want to avoid, lines and veils and whatnot. Monte Cook Games has a system agnostic consent in gaming PDF for free. We have a link to that in our Session 0 document. That has a whole bunch of different suggestions. You can print out the list and have people just make check marks next to the things that they don't want or they want to veil, right? And then it just works out really nicely. It's well presented. It goes over all sorts of what everything means, all that sort of stuff. So we put all of those resources kind of right in the middle of this Session 0 document, just so it's really easy for people to access all of this information. But also in the document, it goes over like, the logistics of playing and like what sort of game are we going to play? What sort of story do we want to tell? All that sort of stuff from both a GM and a player perspective. So we love to say on the show, there's a lot of GM advice out there, but not a lot of player advice. Mm-hmm. So we like to try to fill that gap where we can.
Yeah,
right? Awesome.
I think that this document too, like if you pull it up and you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, it's 8 or 9 pages long. It isn't, I promise. A lot of it is links. A lot of it is like notes on the questions that we ask in there. A lot of it is questions that like might not even be relevant in your game. When I typed it up, I was just like, I'm going to put in everything that you could possibly want to talk about in a Session 0 in one place. so that you don't have to try and come up with it.
Yeah.
So we encourage people to make a copy of it, save it on your drive, share it with your group. You can type in it all you want.
Yeah.
I found it to be very useful in my games, to kind of send to people and be like, here's like things that I think we might want to discuss.
Yeah. And I use it all the time when I link people to safety tools, because we've got a whole bunch of them on there. It's not a everything list. There's definitely some that are missing, but there's so many different tools out there. There's a little bit for everybody. Mm-hmm. But for things that we don't cover specifically in here, they've got the ttrpg safety toolkit, which has a lot, and I believe it's ever expanding. There's even different languages.
There's a change log in there. They're constantly updating it.
Exactly, and they're doing a fantastic job in that. And I want to give them a ton of credit for organizing all of that information, because it is just phenomenal what they did. But yeah, check out our Session Zero document, and it's all right there for you.
We did the work, so you don't have to.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
So that's the spiel I've been wanting to say for a while. Well, we haven't been able to shoehorn it into the conversation quite yet. About me, though?
Yeah, sure. About you.
You want to know about me?
Yeah, tell us, Ryan. Tell us all about you.
Okay, Ryan Boelter, Lord Neptune on Twitter, and I'm a dad, a demi-gendered dad who does game design, sound design, podcasting, and goodness, what else do I do? Oh, I'm working on an audio drama.
Oh, you're making a game. Did you say game design already?
I did, yeah. Game design. Okay,
because last time you forgot that.
I know. So yeah, I'm making a game called Chimera, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game where you blend multiple genres together to create a custom world that is going to be unique to your group only. And then you blend two different playbooks together to create a unique character that exists within those genres. And then you kind of play to find out what happens in that sort of fantastic story. I did a live stream actual play campaign called A Tale of Twinkle and Awe. And we blended all three genres, I believe, of magical girls, superheroes, and fantasy. And we just had this really wild solar punk world that was such a fantastic experience. And then I did a one-shot for International Podcast Month, which included all three genres plus the musical genre. So it was very musical based. There was people broke out into musical numbers by describing what the numbers were, what the flash dances were, and what the general theme of the songs were. And it was really fun.
Still haven't gotten to play it.
I know, soon. Goodness gracious, we gotta put a game together or something.
We did character creation for it though, and I was it was phenomenal. I'm so excited to play it. I tell people every time that we're on anything together and Ryan talks about this game that I'm like, I know it sounds like it wouldn't work, but it does. Because even I was like, Ryan, that sounds cool and all, but are you sure?
Yeah.
And he is, and it's very good. It worked so much more smoothly than I ever expected it could have.
Yeah.
So
Amelia is my litmus test of is this good enough? And so I'm really excited.
Amelia hates everything, and she thinks this is okay. So.
Yeah, if Amelia says this is great, then I know I'm sitting on something good.
Well, when I first learned of Chimera, I thought oh, okay, well, this is a game that makes character creation really interesting from the person who does character creation as a podcast. So, I in some ways wasn't surprised because, if you're going to design a game, I would think character creation would be important in it. And two, there's a level of trust that this is probably pretty good about that part of it. So, not that I've gotten to experience it, but I hope to someday. I think it's such a cool concept.
Well, yeah. It's one part character creation, one part collaborative world building, and if you listen to a character creation cast, you know how much I love collaborative world building. I'm just such a sucker for hey, let's as a group make up details about this world, and everybody's going to care about this world. Mm-hmm. there's just something about it that just makes the experience like a million times better, just because like, you know, person A created this shopkeep that just happens to be this like adorable like you know, puppy person, and now everybody fawns over this shopkeeper that should have just been a throwaway NPC, right?
Yeah, or you decide to make your magical girl familiar a pizza rat named Lorenzo.
Yeah, exactly. And now you love Lorenzo.
And now I love Lorenzo.
Exactly. So it's really fun when you can build upon something like that creatively together, and you know, that even goes hand to hand with the safety tools. Is you're creating a story together. You're not experiencing a story happening at you in most cases.
Yeah, you already know everybody's bought into the things that are there.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you are helping to create the world that you are playing in, safety tools are also extremely important there, because if you're introducing an element into the world that does not sit well with another player, goodness gracious, you want to have those sorts of conversations freely, right? Because before, like, this weird building that this person created 3 sessions ago is now a prominent portion of the story, and I hated it when they created it back then. And it's still,
I didn't say anything, and now it's our headquarters.
I know. Now it's just awkward to bring it up. It's like,
and this is the worst form of architecture. I hate it.
Exactly. Can we change it from Gothic architecture to something like more?
I hate brutalism.
But yeah, I mean, collaborative world building. It's perfect when you have the buy-in from everybody. And you have the ability to be safe about it as well.
That was the longest plug anybody's ever given, Ryan.
I know.
You got distracted like halfway
I got distracted because I love talking about world building. Oh my gosh. Okay.
No, it's good. It's good. It's really good. But
have us on for another podcast about world building. Okay.
Yeah, you guys can come back on and we'll do this some more. I mean, definitely. Amelia, so you tell people a little bit about you. Do your
yes,
spiel.
I am the other co-host of Character Creation Cast. I am on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. I also have a podcast that we're like really fingers crossed maybe going to get back to, called Garbage of the Five Rings, which is on the history and lore of the Legend of the Five Rings role-playing game and card game. The tagline is, "For when you love a thing, but you know it's trash." I am also one of this year's Ennies judges. I did it last year and I'm doing it again this year, and I'm very excited about it. I cannot talk to you about it, but I get to read role-playing game books, and then I get to help curate the list for fan voting in July, August. I don't remember. It depends on when Gen Con is this year. Who knows? But that has been a lot of fun. I have read so many good games and learned so much about game design and the industry over the last year. And I'm really excited I get to do it again.
I just got to say, you're like the perfect person for that role. Like knowing your personality and what makes you tick in sort of organization and all that sort of stuff.
Because I'm extremely judgmental.
In a very good way. And like
I keep telling people, like, I love judging things. I do it all the time.
But you're good at it because you're good at being like you're objectively good at it. You're not.
I like being able to, it like tickles that like data part of my brain too. It's like I like to take a massive amount of information and distill it down into the important parts.
Exactly.
But also I like that I get to look at all of these creative projects and, you know, sort of see the really amazing things that people are making. There are so many games that I've read in the last year that have been like, I never would have thought of that. How does your brain work that way? Tell me your secrets.
Yeah.
And like, it's really reinvigorated something in me, seeing all of these like cool new things and realizing that we don't have to play the same 10 games over and over again.
Yeah, seriously. Seriously.
And also like, I have so many games on my shelf to play that I'm never going to get to play. That part's sad.
Yeah. That's.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm just looking over my shoulder here, and my goodness, I maybe touched like 3 of them.
I know.
And it gets
I know.
worse for me all the time as new Kickstarters put out new games and I buy them and they add them to my shelf and I
Yeah.
never play them. But I've been recently trying to learn to think of reading RPG books as a way of playing them. You know, about, you know, and as you do, create characters, right? You can create characters whether you have a group going and whatever, and that's a
Yeah.
way of playing and thinking about playing RPGs in different ways. I have to.
I think
'cause
it's been really valuable to me to sort of like dissect them, and it's like, why did you make this mechanical decision? Like, how does this? It's something we look at on our show all the time. It's
Yeah.
like, why did you choose these mechanics to tell this kind of story? Like, if this is the theme of your game, why do you play it this way?
Mm-hmm.
And I've found a lot of value in reading all of these games too, and realizing why I like the things I do and like what I'm looking for in games too. Is it's been a learning experience for me and how I game too, on top of just like knowing there are lots of games that I want to play.
Yeah.
I've gotten better at like understanding why I like the things that I do. So I think keep buying the games. There's value in just reading.
Mhm.
There really is.
Yeah. I would say about 50% of the Kickstarters that I back are not because I care about the product, but I care about the people behind the product.
Yeah, that too. That too.
And I'm like, I don't need this book, but there's so many good people that are working on it. I want to support them.
There's also
And-
that, like, in the one specific instance where I want to play this particular game, I'm going to be so glad that I have it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The one time it comes up where somebody says, do you know of a game where you play time traveling Visigoths, but also, like, what if you wanted to play a goth kid at a mall, but like in the 90s? And I'll be like, oh, I have that game.
Yep. Exactly.
I have that game on my shelf.
My go-to person for that is Jeff Stormer. If I need to ask if a game exists, you ask Jeff Stormer if a game exists. Is there a game where this happens in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. I picked Jeff's game for my judges pick last year too. It was like,
Yeah.
Oh,
Jeff
anyone
knows
can,
lots of games and Jeff makes great games.
Yeah. Was that Anyone Can Wear the Mask? Was that your judge's pick?
Yeah, that was my judge's
Oh,
pick.
it's such a good game.
Yes.
He just came on the show a couple weeks ago, and we talked about that game to specifically talk about Anyone Can Wear the Mask. It was really,
Oh, it's such a good game. It's such a good game.
it was a really good conversation about it too. So folks who are watching this, if you missed the episode, should go back and watch it. Anyway, both of you, thank you so much for taking the time to come on this show. I really appreciate it. I would love to do this more, so we'll have to have you back on Holy Happy
Yes,
Hour.
please. This was so much fun.
I'm so thankful that you invited us, but I really love being able to do stuff with Amelia outside of our show.
Yeah, I know.
We-
That's been a lot of fun. We've been kind of like dipping our toes into like being on other people's shows.
I know.
It's kind of fun.
It is
I don't
fun.
like it. Less work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're welcome to do it here anytime. So
Wonderful.
Yes.
I am going to, but having said that, I'm going to now banish them to my green room as I go back to being just me and say goodbye to everybody. So
no.
goodbye. Exactly. And they're gone. And so yes, this is the part of the show at the end when I say goodbye to all you lovely people watching. So thank you again to Ryan and Amelia for taking the time to come on Holy Happy Hour as my guests this week. I really appreciate them and this conversation that we've had tonight. I really do. So make sure you subscribe to their show, Character Creation Cast. Check out all the links that are in the show notes. Really, really valuable stuff there. Hey, and speaking of like subscribing to things, you can follow me here on Twitch if you're watching us on Twitch, or you can subscribe on YouTube if you are watching this on YouTube right now. If you're watching this on Facebook, I don't know what you do. Like the Facebook page, I actually have no idea. But if you only caught part of tonight's show and you want to watch the whole thing, you'll be able to watch it for a brief time on Twitch. But you'll be able to watch it immediately from beginning to end on YouTube as soon as the show is over, because we're streaming it there. Or you can go to allportsopen.com and watch every episode of the show afterward. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and watch all of our video content. You can catch all of our video content on our website. So, and we've got other great shows on our network to check out. So huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my APON co-founder, for the artwork on the stream and for everything he does for the All Ports Open Network, which is a lot. And thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on this show that you will hear again in just a moment. I'm That Gamer Priest Ben. Come back next week, same bat time, same bat channel, for the first ever actual play stream on Holy Happy Hour, where you're playing Ma Nishtana with the designers of that game. It's really good. It's a really good game. And my wife Mel will make her first appearance on Holy Happy Hour to play with us. And I gave away earlier in the conversation that it's pre-recorded. We played a couple weeks ago. It was such a good game. It was such a good experience. I can't wait for you to see it. It's going to be 2 parts. It's going to be next week and the week after. So, all right. I think that's all my after show notes I have for you all this week. We're not raiding into any other channels this week that I don't think. So, everyone, enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours, my friends, and I will hopefully see you on here again real soon. And don't forget to come back next week.